Darkest Hour is a 2017 British biographical war drama film directed by Joe Wright and written by Anthony McCartan. It stars Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill, in his early days as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom during the Second World War and the May 1940 War Cabinet Crisis. The cast also includes Kristen Scott Thomas as Clementine Churchill, Lily James as Elizabeth Leighton, Stephen Delane as Viscount Halifax, Ronald Pickup as Neville Chamberlain, and Ben Mendelsohn as King George VI. The title of the film refers to a description of the early days of the war, widely attributed to Churchill. Darkest Hour had its world premiere at the 44th Telluride Film Festival on 1 September 2017. It began a limited release in the U.S. on November 22, 2017, followed by a wide release on December 22, and was released on January 12, 2018 in the UK. The film grossed $150 million worldwide and received positive reviews from critics, who deemed Oldman's performance one of the best of his career. Darkest Hour received several accolades, including Best Actor for Oldman at the Academy Awards, the BAFTAs, the Golden Globes, and the SAG Awards. 9. Plot. In May 1940, the opposition Labour Party in Parliament demand the resignation of British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain for being too weak in the face of the Nazi onslaught. Conservative Party colleagues want Lord Halifax as his successor, but Halifax does not feel it is his time. Chamberlain chooses the only man whom the opposition will accept as leader of a national government, Winston Churchill, who had correctly predicted the danger from Adolf Hitler before the war but has a poor reputation in Parliament. As Germany invades the Low Countries, Churchill is brusque with his new secretary Elizabeth Leighton for mishearing him, which earns him a rebuke from his wife Clementine. King George VI, who is skeptical of Churchill due to his actions during the abdication crisis, reluctantly invites him to form a government. Churchill includes Chamberlain as Lord President of the Council and Halifax as Foreign Secretary. Parliament reacts coolly to Churchill's first speech promising blood, toil, tears, and sweat. Chamberlain and Halifax are appalled by Churchill's refusal to negotiate for peace and plan to resign from the government to force a vote of no confidence and create a situation in which Halifax would likely become Prime Minister. Churchill visits French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud, who thinks that Churchill is delusional for not admitting that the Allies are losing the Battle of France, while Churchill is furious that the French do not have a plan to counterattack. Although U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt is sympathetic to Churchill's plight, his actions are limited by an isolationist Congress and the Neutrality Acts. Churchill draws ire from his cabinet and advisors for delivering a radio address in which he falsely implies the Allies are advancing in France, earning him a rebuke from the king. Halifax and Chamberlain continue to push to use Italian ambassador Giuseppe Bastianini as an intermediary with Germany. The British Expeditionary Force is trapped at Dunkirk and Calais, and Britain begins preparing for a German invasion. Against the advice of the War Cabinet, Churchill orders Brigadier Nicholson in Calais to lead the 30th Infantry Brigade to distract the enemy and buy time for the evacuation of soldiers from Dunkirk. The debacle in France causes the War Cabinet to support negotiating with Germany. Under heavy pressure, Churchill agrees to consider a negotiated peace, but chokes on the words as he tries to dictate a letter requesting talks. George VI unexpectedly visits Churchill, explaining that he has come to support Churchill to continue the war. Churchill's idea to have civilian boats evacuate troops from Dunkirk, Operation Dynamo, is initiated. Still uncertain, Churchill impulsively rides the London Underground, for the first time in his life, and asks startled passengers for their opinions. They all want to continue to fight. Churchill addresses the outer cabinet and other members of Parliament and finds that they, too, have little desire to surrender. As Churchill prepares to address Parliament, Halifax asks Chamberlain to continue with their plan to resign, but Chamberlain decides to first listen to the address. Finishing his speech, Churchill proclaims, "We shall fight on the beaches, should the Germans invade," to resounding support from the opposition, while the Conservative MPs behind him sit in silence until Chamberlain mops his brow with his handkerchief, a prearranged signal that they should support the PM. Churchill exits to cheers and enthusiastic waving of order papers. An epilogue reveals that almost all of the soldiers trapped at Dunkirk were successfully evacuated. Chamberlain died 6 months later, Halifax was reassigned to a posting in Washington, D.C., and Churchill was voted out of office after the end of World War II in Europe.
Cast:
Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill, Kristen Scott Thomas as Clementine Churchill, Ben Mendelsohn as King George VI, Lily James as Elizabeth Layton, Ronald Pickup as Neville Chamberlain, Stephen Delane as Viscount Halifax, Nicholas Jones as Sir John Simon, Samuel West as Anthony Eden, David Schofield as Clement Attlee, Richard Lumsden as General Ismay, Malcolm Story as General Ironside, Hilton McRae as Arthur Greenwood, Benjamin Whitrow as Sir Samuel Hoare, Joe Armstrong as John Evans, Adrian Rollins as Air Chief Marshal Dowding, David Bamber as Admiral Ramsay, Paul Leonard as Admiral Dudley Pound, Dmitry Goritzas as Cabinet Secretary Bridges, Olivier Broche as Paul Reynaud, Brian Pettifer as Kingsley Wood, Richard Glover as Claude Nicholson. David Strathairn provides the voice of U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt, heard on a telephone call with Churchill. This was the final film role for Whitrow, who died after its September premiere. Production, development, and casting. On February 5, 2015, it was announced that Working Title Films had acquired Darkest Hour, a speculative screenplay by the Theory of Everything screenwriter Anthony McCarten, about Winston Churchill in the early days of the Second World War. 10. On March 29, 2016, it was reported that Joe Wright was in talks to direct the film. 11. In April 2016, Gary Oldman was reported to be in talks to play Churchill. 12. On September 6, 2016, it was announced that Focus Features would release the film in the United States on November 24, 2017. While Ben Mendelsohn was set to play King George VI and Kristen Scott Thomas was cast as Clementine Churchill. 7. On November 8, 2016, Stephen Delane joined the cast. 13. John Hurt was initially cast as Neville Chamberlain, but dropped the role in pre-production as he was undergoing treatment for pancreatic cancer. Hurt died in January 2017. 14. 15. Ronald Pickup assumed the role of Chamberlain instead. 16.